Hey everyone, it's SunTypes, and today I'm going to be looking at a bunch of ancient decks from the upcoming set Temple of Forces. This is really cool. We have a bunch of new cards, and this is out in Japan. This is post rotation as well, and ace spec cards are a thing. And these decks did decently well. I don't remember how well all of them did, but there's some really cool concepts in here as well. And by the way, this is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, or for since it came out. And so if Limitless has some new data, so you can click on tournaments and then city leagues, and then see all these city league tournaments, which I believe all have 16 decks, the top 16 decks from the tournament, and you can be like, oh, I want to see these decks and look at all these different decks, right? So that's pretty cool. Um, and you can look at them. The data isn't amazing, I don't think. You can't, under decks here, you can't find the data, unfortunately. Maybe you can. No, it looks like you cannot. And so these are on the Japanese format. I believe these are all actually in Japan. I don't know a ton about, honestly, competitive in general. But yeah, these are equal to the league cups or league challenges. I'm not sure which, but they are essentially like that. But then like large Japanese tournaments will sometimes be on this website. For example, this tournament has some data. But anyway, the city leagues are really cool. Then if you look up a card like Roaring Moon EX, we're in tournaments. Cards Roaring Moon EX, there we go. And then normally you say, oh, open all deck lists. These are all like the not Japanese or like the quote regular tournaments. Limitless is regular tournaments, but then if you're in the hotbar, you can't see it here. But after it says deck list, you type slash and then JP for Japan, and then that will show you the Japanese deck list, the City League deck list specifically. Um, and so then you can see this different data. This is all post rotation, so it's useful. There's some really cool stuff here, and that's a way that I use to find some of the things. Well, I've not looked at these lists at all. There's some really cool stuff that I haven't looked at, but it's really fun. And I think there's more deck diversity. The decks are categorized differently and honestly better as well. So we're not going to be looking at Roaring Moon with the Dunsparce today. But if you want me to cover stuff like that in the future, comment that down below as well. But first of all, we have what I describe as a quote regular ancient box list. I think we have a few ancient box lists, only looking at two today, but the main two Pokemon are Roaring Moon, Vengeful Strike for 2 dark into 70 and 10 more for each ancient card in your discard pile. This can obviously do a lot, potentially. This list has a bunch of ancient cards. We have Sada's Vitality, this other supporter that I think explores guidance, this Ace Back, Earthen Vessel, the Booster Energy Capsule, than these other Pokemon as well. And so the other main Pokemon, I guess, is Koraidon here. Origin Roar for fighting colorless. It does 30 for each ancient Pokemon in play. So this deck runs almost all ancient Pokemon. There are two non-ancient Pokemon though. So if you have both of those in play, you're maxing out at unfortunately only 120. Okay, I'll talk about Cobalion in a minute. But yeah, Koraidon is pretty good. They also have other attacks. This one has Shred, which could be used. Or wait, no, that can't be used. Never mind. I guess there's 120 for 4 and Roaring Moon. That's pretty awful though. But lastly, the third, I guess, main Pokemon. This one I wouldn't necessarily consider a main Pokemon, but this list runs 4 of it. It's pretty good. Fluttering in the Night's the ability, and so for Fluttermane here, it's Ancient 90 HP. As long as it's in the active, your opponent's active Pokemon has no abilities except for this one. So that's potentially really useful if you're up against Lost Zone mostly. It's mostly good against Lost Zone. And then you want two in. Well, actually, no, there is no rope, but potentially you might want two in play if they are running a card like um, Iron Bundle. Although I don't think that's seeing much play. And so no rope is useful for you. They can gust around it though, but it is potentially really good in that matchup. And you do strike throw 90 for 3 colorless and put 2 damage counters on one of your opponents, or sorry, on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. So you can spread around the 20. I don't know why like if you'd really use that, but it's decent. You'd certainly use the attack. It's not like I think the spreads is like pretty underwhelming. But and the damage output isn't great, but it is an attack you'll use. If you're just leaving in the active, it's not useless by any means. And there are ways to accelerate. But there is Cobalion here. Cobalion's interesting. This is a card that I might talk about some more in the future. But Justified Laws, your ability, you do have an attack which you can use and it's not awful, but you can't really pull it off super easily in this deck. But Justified Law, your basic Pokemon's attacks do 30 more to your opponent's active Dark Pokemon or Darkness Pokemon. This is before weakness or resistance, which doesn't matter too much, but this is useful obviously against Dark Pokemon like Baby Roaring Moon EX, and Charizard EX. Mostly Charizard EX, right? Charizard EX has really high HP, and this is nice. And then on top of that, we have Reading Greninja for drawing, right? That's pretty commonly played card. We also have Grant to be able to discard cards from your hand. That's a fun card. Besides its vitality, of course, it's an ancient supporter and it accelerates energy and it draws cards, which is useful. Then Explorer's Guidance is also a very decent supporter. I've talked about it before. It's a pseudo reprint of Hapu. It's essentially a reprint of Hapu. Look at the top 6 cards of your deck, put 2 of them into your hand, discard the remaining cards, but it's also ancient. Gets cards in the discard, is a draw card. It's incredible in this deck, I think. I have not played this deck yet. I haven't really played too much post rotation. But yeah, and then aside from that, we see the Booster Energy Capsule. We have the Ace spec as well. Awakening Drum, draw a card for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. This can draw, obviously, a lot of cards, potentially up to 6 on an item. It goes in the discard. You do more damage with your Roaring Moon. It's really powerful in this deck specifically. It's not super great in other decks, but overall, it's a very powerful card. We do see Emergency Board here, which reduces your tree cost by 1. Useful on Radiant Greninja mostly. You could use it on Fluttermane as well. And that's pretty good. It's an interesting card. It's best in Lost Zone, but it can be played in other decks as well. And aside from that, pretty straightforward stuff. We have like Ball Search, Earthen Vessel as well. It's moderately decent, but it kind of thins your deck, and most importantly, is an ancient card, so you can do more damage and discard. It's a pretty decent addition, but for the most part, you're just rushing through your deck, getting cards in the not in the not in the lost zone, but in the discard, which is useful because it boosts your damage with Roaring Moon, but you're relying on Koraidon early on. Next list, similar idea. We do see a copy of Slitherwing as well, which can do 120. Well, actually, it's more like 140 for fighting, and then it's 120 and burn, and also does 90 to itself, which is not ideal, but it is what it is. With the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, you can actually attack twice with it and not knock yourself out, which is cool. And then we see Roaring Moon EX, of course, a very powerful 3 energy basic Darkness Pokemon that can one-shot anything with its one attack. And then we see Prime Catcher instead of the Awakening Drum, yeah. And so that gusts one of your Pokemon up, your opponent's Pokemon up, and switches your Pokemon out as well, which can be useful. We also see Switch Cart. This list does not run Switch Cart. So very similar ideas, though less gust. Well, same amount of gusting actually, but we do see Prime Catcher being devoted to it. Less draw, I guess, but more Pokegears. Very similar concepts here. This deck, I think I like a little more. We do see Pokestop. This other list runs Artizone, which isn't bad, but Pokestop's really useful for turboing through your deck and getting that higher damage faster. You do kind of rely on Pokegear, however. But overall, a really solid deck and a really cool deck, and a similar list, but very powerful. We see less Koraidons and less Fluttermanes as well because of this Slitherwing and Roaring Moon, but still really cool. Next up, we have another list focused on Koraidon, but now we move into Roaring Moon. Or no, Raging Bolt. I forget the names of these Pokemon all the time. But Raging Bolt, for those of you who don't know, bursting out, discard your hand, draw 6 is usable. It's honestly not too bad if you miss, but it's obviously not what you're aiming for. Polar Fusion here, however, is the same as Chien-Pau's attack, I guess. It's kind of different, but discard any amount of base energy attached to your Pokemon in play. Does 70 for each energy discard in this way, so that can do infinite damage or like theoretically, essentially infinite damage. If you have 5 energy in play and you discard them, then you do 350, which is, I don't know, I kind of want to say it's enough to one-shot everything. That's not really true. There's some card, like, you can essentially have 500 HP on certain Pokemon with this set, but that probably, hopefully, doesn't happen to you. And even then, you can reach it with like 8 energy. I mean, that's a lot of energy, but you technically can, and it is lightning colorless. No, lightning fighting. Said the wrong thing there. Yeah, the attack is not super easy to pay. But we do have fighting energy acceleration to your other Pokemon. Sandy Shocks just accelerates the fighting from your discard to it, assuming that your opponent's taken 2 prizes already, or if they have 4 fewer prize cards remaining. Essentially the same thing. I believe it's the same in standard, but expanded is technically a little different. But anyway, and then you have Earth and Spike 200 for fighting colorless during your next turn that can attack, which is usable. And you have that Koraidon for their single prize attacker, early game attacker. And before you have Sandy Shocks go in, so you can get energies on it and then do Raging Bolt. You also have Sada's Vitality to just get energy in play, which is really useful. And then this doesn't have the Roaring Moon, so you don't need absurd amounts of ancient cards. Although you, of course, still play a decent amount because they're quite frankly very good. Or some are you're not like running Flutter Mane, and you're obviously not running Roaring Moon. You're not running the Awakening Drum or whatever. You're not running the Explorer's Guidance, but you are still running Sada's Vitality, Earthen Vessel, Ancient Booster, Ancient Capsule, and then obviously some Ancient Pokemon, so pretty good. We also see TM Devolution. I like this card. I think it's a fun card. It devolves your opponent's Pokemon, good against Stage 2 Rare Candy decks. Here we see another very similar list. We do Squawkabilly though, so this one's going kind of turbo-y. Excuse me. And then we see Energy Switch, Pokemon Catcher. This is very turbo. I didn't look at really any of the lists before I started, but this is super turbo, kind of fun. I feel like it's kind of weird as well. I mean, Koraidon is like okay, turn one. I guess you can turn one Sandy Shocks or Raging Bolt, which is potentially useful because you can hit that 200, that 210 if you want, which is kind of cool. Potentially getting UKOs. I feel like you're a little short though, but this is very turbo Roaring Moon, and you like very much lean into that. This isn't really a Koraidon based deck. This is like at all. It just one Koraidon. It's very Sandy Shocks Roaring Moon focused, and then you can just go in really fast, really powerfully with those, with the Sada's Vitality, and kind of relying on that. And we do see the Prime Catcher as well, so you can Gust turn one, potentially take a knockout on a 2 prizer. Next up, we see another list, pretty similar idea. We see Squawkabilly, Mew EX, Radiant Greninja, and Lumineon V to go very turbo heavy. Again, very similar ideas of this list, but this is even more turbo. But also, I think this is really fun. You do need to be careful of your bench space. We do have Mew EX for a pivot to free up some space. This list does not run any pivots, does have a few switch, but Mew EX giving you a pivot means you can just have one Raging Bolt and then have like 2 Sandy Shocks. But honestly, 3 Sandy Shocks is nice to have in play, as that is going to boost your damage more, and potentially they can be an attacking option. Aside from that, though, very similar, very powerful, though. But lastly, we have two very different ways of powering it up. This list we have Garchomp EX, which Hydrolander, attach up to 3 basic fighting energy for your discard to your bench Pokemon in any way you like, and you do 160. That's obviously really powerful. I mean, 160 for 1 is very good. It's not a ton of damage in general. Raging Bolt, however, will be doing that massive amount of damage. We still see Sandy Shocks. We see a Flutter Mane, which is kind of interesting to buy time in the early game. And we see Barrel as the engine in this list. I think this is really cool having Garchomp EX as a card. I mean, Garchomp's a really fun card. It hasn't seen a ton of play, but how do I don't know. I want to find the deck lists. Is that the thing? Yeah, okay. So it's seen some play. And you can play with like all sorts of different cards. Is this? Oh yeah, this is the Babero list. But yeah, you can play it with Babero. You can play it with all sorts of things. And Garchomp's really fun. It hasn't seen a ton of play so far because it's, as I said, its damage output isn't super high, although it is very efficient. It's a very powerful attack for only 1 energy. But then Raging Bolt comes in and cleans up for that massive amount of damage. It is a little bit of a setup type situation, and you are accelerating energy to a Pokemon with your attack, meaning that your opponent can potentially gust and KO it before you're able to use it. But overall, I think it's still very powerful. Aside from that, you'd have Irida, which is really good in Garchomp decks. You have Professor Sada's Vitality, which is really good, obviously, with Raging Bull and Sandy Shocks, which we were talking about. And we see Buddy Poppin, that searches for the Gibbles and Bidoofs, and yeah, so that's a good card. Then we see Prime Catcher again as well, very good. And lastly, we have, that's right, Gardevoir or Raging Bull. This deck is weird and wacky and fun. So of course you have Gardevoir EX to accelerate Psychic Energy like normal, and you have like normal um, like Guardy stuff. We do actually see both Screamtail and Flutter Mane, there we go, I forgot the name, and Ancient Booster, Energy Capsule, and Raging Bolt. So you can get really high HP on these guys, or relatively high. You are going to damage them, so it'll be lowered back down. But Raging Bolt with Ancient Booster, Energy Capsule, I didn't say, gets up to 300, which is pretty decent. Ancient Booster, Energy Capsule on any Ancient Pokemon is pretty good, giving you 60 more HP, but it's pretty good with Raging Bolt, and then Screamtail and Flutter Mane, it will give you more HP. which is nice for accelerating energy, specifically in the case of Screamtail. Not as much in Fluttermane, you just need 3. But then you accelerate energy to your other Pokemon, then you'd use Stardust Vitality to accelerate energy to Raging Bolt. So it's a lot of pieces going on here. Also, side note, Cryptomaniac's Deciphering or whatever this card, Codebreaker's Solution. Search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle them, put them on top of your deck in any order. Really good in Gardevoir-based decks with Gallade and Curly. It's insane. But yeah, and then you have Thornton. I don't really know what Thornton's here for. That's kind of weird. I mean, it can like recover stuff. It's kind of fun. Overall, there's a lot of really chaotic stuff going on in this deck. I don't know if I think this deck's good or not. It's kind of weird, but it's really fun, and I think it's a deck that people are going to try. I don't know if it's good, as I said. It's really funny, though, and I'm looking forward to seeing if it will be good. Obviously, you do have that Raging Bolt for that one-shot potential, and it's kind of replacing the Gardevoir, right? Gardevoir isn't doing super well without without the other Gardevoir, it is struggling to hit that massive amount of damage, especially without Gardevoir or Zacian or like Mewtwo V Union or any of those really powerful psychic Pokemon. But we do see Raging Bolt, Screamtail, and Fluttermane picking up the flack. Is that the saying? I don't know. I don't think that's the saying. But really cool stuff going on here. And then you do also have Prime Catcher, Counter Catcher, really powerful cards. Buddy Poppin was very good in Guardian as well. And honestly, that's about it, right? Guardy is in kind of a weird spot. It's not a deck I've ever been a massive fan of. But I do think Gardevoir EX and Curly are really fun Pokemon. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to be covering future Pokemon in the next video, I think. But if you enjoyed, consider subscribing, liking the video, all that good stuff. I'm going to be doing more post-rotation content coming up. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.